There is a theme to the scriptures, the Psalms that Emmett read for us there, and it is our hope. And so I begin with the question this morning, what is the foundation of your hope? Hold that in mind. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of different things this morning, but that's the basic question that we're going to keep trying to answer from a number of different angles. Where is your hope? Thus far in our study, we have considered the importance of being able to give an answer for the things that we believe. We've considered that whole defense issue, assuming that we need to give a defense to people who come at us from the outside, from people in the world who come to us and challenge our faith, or we see things on TV from the atheists who challenge that, all of that kind of stuff. And then last week, we talked about from the perspective of being able to give a reason for the things that we believe to our own children so that they will have a foundation for their beliefs. But here's what I want us to consider today. And it goes back to that question, what's the foundation of your hope? When do you need to be able to defend your faith to you? Perhaps that's the most important question of all of these questions about defending our faith. You see, most of us came to our place of faith not through science and reason. I did, because my family were not church-going kind of people, and they weren't active. And so for me, when I came to that point of faith, I wanted to see the evidence. It was important to me. But I realized that most people do not come to faith that way. Most people come to faith one of two ways: through a relationship or through an experience of some kind. Let me talk about relationships, because most people go to church because somebody else introduced them to church. Maybe their parents brought them to church and brought them up in church. Or maybe, as often is the case with guys, there was a girl they wanted to meet, and so in order to get a date with this girl, they had to go to her church or something like that. So sometimes we get started going into our religious traditions based upon relationship. Sometimes it's an emotional experience. You've seen a movie, or you've heard a powerful sermon that really touched you, or there's something happened in your life that touched you, and you responded emotionally to the invitation to become a Christian. And that's how your relationship with God started. Now, none of those things are bad in themselves. But what happens if they fail? What happens if a relationship is gone through death or divorce or a breakup or whatever it might be? What then of your foundation for your faith? Or what if you don't feel the right way anymore? You don't feel like you used to. The feelings gone. What's the foundation of your faith then? Because those things will happen. And here we are, living up here in the middle-class suburban world where everything goes quite well most of the time. Most of you have been able to get the education that you wanted. You enjoy a rewarding career that provides you with a comfortable life. You're probably putting away for retirement, or you might be at the age where you're drawing on your retirement. You have a nice home. You have a car, or two, or three. Your kids are good-looking and healthy, and they have a bright future in front of them, and they're significant in their schools and their peer groups. Life is going well. All seems to be well in our little suburban utopia here. And it's not tested much. But what happens when your perfect world crumbles and caves in? What happens to your faith when a relationship breaks apart or a loved one is lost? What happens to your faith when you lose the things that previously defined your faith? How will you respond when doubt comes? That's when you need to be able to defend your faith to you. Let me give you my story. I didn't do this in the first service because I didn't know about a time frame here. And most of you who have been coming here as long as I have I've heard me say this before. I say this to put it into the context of what we're talking about today, and for those who haven't heard my story before. In 2008, I was leading a new church start in Orlando, and it was going pretty well. That new church start was being funded by an organization called Church Development Fund in Orlando, and that organization, Church Development Fund, was getting their money with a line of credit from a major bank in Central Florida there. In 2008, the economy collapsed in Florida, especially the mortgage economy, whatever you call all that, began to collapse, jobs vaporized, and the banks started running scared. And so this bank that was funding the church development organization drew in their line of credit. That caused the organization that was funding us to foreclose on our loan. And we hadn't missed any payments. Everything was fine, but they got scared. And there was some fine print in the documents that said if things got tight, they could call the money in. And they did. And for a $150,000 loan, they took almost $2 million in property. Okay, so they took the loan, and the elders of the church decided that they couldn't go on. So they closed the church. 10 days after that, Kathleen and I were in the church one day, and we were up on the platform like this, and there was a riser, kind of like this one, and we were bending over, trying to move it around a little bit, and as I was trying to move it, bent over, I heard a loud pop in my back, and I blew out my back, and I had to have emergency back surgery, and it was where it was positioned on my spine, it was on the inside, and I had a really good neurosurgeon, but he couldn't quite get it all, and there's nerve damage, and even today I don't have feeling below my knee. And then I had all kinds of complications as a result of that. I spent most of that summer in and out of the hospital for various reasons. And so there came a time, within a very short period of time, a couple of months in fact, I lost my church, I lost my health insurance, I lost my retirement, I lost my source of income, I lost my health, and then I would lose my home. Now, there came a point when I was trying to recover in my living room in a recliner with Bible in hand, and you know what? I was not wrestling with evolution. I did not find myself sitting there pondering the existence of good and evil. I sat there on the couch and I asked myself, maybe there isn't really a God. Now, I share my story because if I can get myself to that position, you can too. And some of your stories are much more dramatic than mine. I'm not facing cancer or death of a loved one or anything like that. My point is this: there will come times in your life when you will doubt, is God really there? And when you find yourself in that position, the question is, what is your foundation for hope? And so today I want to give you some concrete, some foundational stones that are not part of feelings and relationships outside of that. So let me share with you Matthew 7:24 and following. This is the kind of towards the end of the Sermon on the Mount, and you can follow along if you want to. Matthew 7, beginning at verse 24. This is a parable told by Jesus, and it echoes the theme that Emmett has been sharing with you from the Psalms about foundations. Listen. Therefore, anyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the wind blew, and I chose this translation for this word. The wind slammed against that house. There will come a time in your life when the situations in your life will slam against the house. And yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the wind blew and slammed against the house, and it fell. and great was its fall. Let's stop right there and pray about this. Father in heaven, I just thank you that you are there, that you don't move, you don't change. It's us who flutter about in doubt. So I pray, Father, that you help us to reestablish the correct foundations here this morning. And I pray for the right words to say. I pray for your Holy Spirit here this morning. And we give you the glory in the name of Jesus. Amen. The study of Christian evidences, or apologetics as the official name is, that's a full field of study. I mean, you could work on this every day, your entire life, and men do, and never reach the end of this study. So I can only kind of tickle you a little bit here this morning with it. But I just want to kind of give you a brief overview of Christian evidence in like 3 different streams. And I want to begin with the first stream that I call truth that is observed, truth that you can see for yourself, truth that is your own personal experience. And an extension of that would be truth that you witness, or you have a testimony from someone else who also had that same kind of experience. Let me illustrate. I have a candle, a real candle. It's not battery. And I want to light it up here. Right, now everybody in the room can see the light. For you, seeing the light here in the candle is a personal experience that you are having right now. Right? We all share that. I can put my hand over it and I can tell you, wow, that's hot. And if I leave my hand there, it'll burn my hand. That is my personal testimony to the truth. I believe that is true because I personally am experiencing it. You, however, are not experiencing the heat of this candle right now. For you, you're taking it on my testimony of my personal experience. I'm saying this is true. I'm expecting you to believe my testimony to this truth. Now, why would you believe that? Well, a couple of things. You've had similar experiences yourself, or you trust me as a witness to that truth. A lot of what we believe in the Christian faith is based on exactly that kind of testimony. Okay? And it's the believability and the trustworthiness of the person giving you the witness, who is the witness. What's my motive in telling you that? Is there any corroborating evidence out there? Is it reasonable and logic that I say it's truth, that this is true, or is it completely illogical? All of those things come into play when you are processing someone else's experience, and you have to decide whether what they share with you is true or not. That's the kind of stuff that Todd has to deal with in court all the time. Do you believe the testimony? Is it true based upon the trustworthiness of the witnesses there? Let me give you some real examples. Muhammad claimed to have received revelations from God that gave him authority to start this new religion by the sword. And millions have accepted his claim as truth. Should we? Joseph Smith claimed to have received a divine revelation in the form of these golden tablets, which went on to become the Book of Mormon. And hundreds of thousands of Mormons today believe he was true. Should we? Likewise, we have the Bible. And the writers of the Bible claim to have had the personal experience. They claim to have been divinely inspired, and they want us to believe their testimony. Is it true? Were they trustworthy? What was their motive? Is there corroborating evidence? Is what they wrote in the Scriptures logical, reasonable? Do the facts add up to the claims? And the answer to every one of those questions is yes, they do. So there's one stream of a truth, or looking at the evidence. Another stream here is what I call cause and effect. And here we get more scientific and less more like witnessing. Objective kind of truth, we'll call it that way. Let me demonstrate with the flashlight here. I turn on the flashlight, and you see the light, and you ask the question, where did the light come from? Now, if Richard Dawkins were here, he would talk to you about atomic particles and how electrons can flow from one atom to another atom. And if a circuit is complete of the atoms, they can flow in a circuit, and when they hit a certain part of the circuit that is sensitive to light, they will emit light. In this case, these are LEDs, and so the characteristic of an LED is it emits light when electricity flows through it. That kind of thing. But behind that, talking about the science of how it works, the answer to the question, why is there light? Well, there's light because I turn the light on. Is that backward, country bumpkin? Well, that's ultimately behind the science. I turn the light on. And it's really kind of that simple there, right? Why? Because behind every effect, light, there was a cause. I turned the light on. You see? You go outside and you look at the sun shining out there. You look up at this big ball of hot gases in the sky. And you can talk about nuclear fusion or fission or whatever it is, and how heat is given off and how light is created. But ultimately you have to answer the question, who lit the fire? What's the cause behind the effect? The earth is spinning on its axis around the sun at just the right distance, at just the right angles, all of that. And we look at it and go, that's pretty amazing. Who did that? What started that? Behind everything that exists, there is a cause for the effect. And that's where the Big Bang Theory and that's where the evolutionary theory falls apart. But it's exactly where Genesis works. Now, the movie God's Not Dead is based upon a book by Rice Brooks, and he says something here I just want to share with you. Let me find it here. Page 71. By the way, one of the new developments among the atheist and Big Bang people is that they pretty much universally agree now that the steady state theory is no longer valid. Steady state theory said the universe has never changed. Almost even all of them now believe that the universe had a beginning. Even the most hardcore atheist Big Bang Theory people believe that the universe had a beginning. Rice Brooks answers that. He says, the cause of the universe must exist outside of space and time, since space and time came into existence in this beginning. It must be therefore eternal, non-material, and ultimately personal, since the universe appears to have the purposeful intent of supporting human life. Cause and effect. One of the early mathematicians that helped develop the higher levels of math that we use today was a German mathematician by the name of Gottfried Leibniz. He lived in the 17th century, and he posed an interesting question, which for some reason we don't even wrestle with this one much, but I think it's very strong in this whole argument about cause and effect. He simply said, why is there something rather than nothing? The fact that there is something says there was a cause. You see? And then before the service here, I asked you about Occam's razor. Remember what that is? You know what it is? Basically, it says this. It's a principle, I guess. It goes like this. Among competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. God created. There it is. And that brings up a good point. We should always be careful as believers, especially when we see things on TV that just, or in school or wherever, that just teach things that are theory as if they are facts, when indeed they're not. There is a difference between scientific method and scientific theories. Unfortunately, we now live in an age where theories are presented as fact without the proof. The scientific method says you come up with the laws of science based upon repeatable and controllable things that you can use as proof, as evidence. And upon the things that you can prove, By repeating them and controlling the circumstances, you can come up with the scientific laws and say, that's science. On the other hand, we have scientific hypotheses and scientific theories. Basically how that works is somebody has an idea, like origins of the universe. Somebody has an idea, and so they put it out there as a hypothesis that the universe began in a single millifraction of a second and exploded to everything it is. That's a theory. And so in theory, the way to prove the theory is you use the scientific method. If you cannot prove your hypothesis using the scientific method, it's not a valid hypothesis, right? Unfortunately, we're skipping that part today. Now we're teaching hypothesis as scientific law when it cannot be proven, okay? And I think it's important for you and I as Christians, when we're living this culture that is now operating that way, to make sure we understand there's a difference between theory and law. Okay? So let's go to another area. It's kind of the same kind of stuff, but it kind of plays out the same way. Let's talk about design and designer. I grabbed a couple of paintings from home, just to use as an example. When you look at a painting, you assume there's a painter, right? You don't look at a painting and think, I wonder how that popped into existence. Your automatic assumption is behind the painting is a painter. And you don't have to know the painter personally in order to believe that there's a painter. The fact that it exists says someone created it. Cause and effect, design and designer. You see? You see how that adds up? For some reason, we've moved into our culture has moved into a place where, well, just because I see the design doesn't mean there's a designer. Well, that doesn't make sense. That's irrational, you see? The painting itself is proof of the painter. When you admire creation, you're admiring the creator. There's a whole bunch of examples, and we've used a lot of them before, and there's, many examples. For example, the classic one about if there's an explosion in a print shop, you would not expect the Declaration of Independence to roll out the door. The Declaration of Independence shows evidence of design. Behind that amazing document is a writer. It didn't happen by accident. Another classic example is the wind in the junkyard. If the wind is blowing in the junkyard, no matter how fast the wind is blowing, you would not expect the blowing wind in the junkyard to produce a fully operational Boeing 777. Why? It's irrational. The design screams for a designer. And everything in our universe does that. Cause and effect. You see? Let me give you one. I don't think I've shared this one before. The example of the chicken. Little, lowly, stupid chicken, brain about the size of a pea. That kind of thing. You know, that as simple as a chicken is, it can do something that all of our modern technology cannot do. This little animal, overnight, can take wheat and worms and turn them into eggs. We can't do that. Chicken can, because the chicken had a designer. You see? Here's one I've given before. It's to me, it's just absolutely amazing. Water. Water has a specific heat, and in chemistry terms, that you know what that means. That means that water does not boil until it reaches 212 degrees. And that means a whole bunch of chemical reactions in our bodies and everywhere else in the universe are pretty much stable. They can happen. If water had a lower specific heat, it would boil over with the least amount of activity. The ocean is the Earth's thermostat. It keeps the Earth from getting too hot in the daytime, too cold at night. Water is the universal solvent. It dissolves acids, bases, and salts all together in one place. Water is chemically relatively inert. That means it provides a medium for reactions to happen without reacting in them. Now, what does that mean? It means our blood works. In our bloodstream, the water in our blood can hold a minimum of 64 different substances. Any other liquid would turn to sludge. But it works because our blood is based upon water. Without the amazing properties of water, life on earth would be impossible. Design demands a designer. So that takes us to the discussion of accident versus design. Those who would say there is no God claim that all of creation was just an accident. And they base that upon, let me say it this way. The whole theory about the age of the earth is based upon this principle that if you give elements enough time and enough speed and enough energy, the universe will pop into existence. Okay? That's the basic theory there. And that's why the evolutionists, the Big Bang people keep making the age of the earth longer and longer because they need more time to get things stirred up. You see? And I have a good illustration for that. This plastic box here represents space. Okay? The final frontier. And these Lego pieces here represent the elements that exist in the universe. And by the way, this begs the question, where do the elements come from, right? You see? All right, so based upon the theory of the Big Bang people, scientists and all of them, if you put the elements of the universe out there in space and give them enough time, nothing. Still nothing. So, but they tell us that if you shake it up long enough, eventually something will happen. Now, how long do you think I'd have to shake this box in order for some little simple model of Legos to come into shape? A year? 1,000 years? What if I go faster? Would 10,000 years make these Legos come together in a finished product? No, of course not. Even when you see something simple as a Lego toy put together in a shape, it says a designer put that design together and made it happen. Another good object lesson. Oh, by the way, let me give you the math on that. There's a whole area of mathematics that deals with the laws of probability. Now, right now, the atheists say that the earth, or I shouldn't say atheists, the evolutionists, non-creationists, say that the earth is about 10.5 billion to 14 billion years old. It keeps getting longer, okay? And that they base that theory upon shaking the Lego blocks. It takes 10 billion years to make the form come together. All right, so listen to this. Astronomer Sir Frederick Hoyle estimated that if you took all of the elements of the universe and shook them together at the speed of light, it would take 293.5 times the estimated age of the earth. So mathematically, it cannot even work, not even close. I don't know what that comes out to. It would be like trillions of years instead of billions of years for the mathematical probabilities to even get close. Let me give you another object lesson. I couldn't find one. That's why Kathleen was late, by the way. She was over at the house looking for a Rubik's Cube, and we couldn't find it. But, for example, I take one of you. You come up here, I put a blindfold on you, give you the Rubik's Cube, all mixed up, and I say, solve the Rubik's Cube. Now, I can't solve a Rubik's Cube without a blindfold. Our son can, but I can't do it. So if you were sitting here blindfolded, how long would it take for you to solve the Rubik's Cube? Well, Hoyle, the same guy quoted a while ago, he estimates blindfolded, if you did one move every second, mathematically speaking, it would take 1.35 trillion years to solve the Rubik's Cube. It doesn't even add up in their own terms, you see. In their own world of saying it just takes more time and more stirring of the Lego parts and you'll get it. No, even in their own world, it cannot work. So I got to stop there. Let me throw out this. Remember, we're talking about the foundation for your hope when doubt comes. When you look at the splendor and the complexity of the universe and everything that is in it, you come to the conclusion that this didn't happen by accident. The painting has a painter. The design has a designer, and so forth. Now, what do we know about him? Well, that's where we'll pick up next week. What we know from what I've talked about this morning is what we have observed. But we can really only know the character of the designer if he reveals himself. And that's what we'll talk about next week. But for today, let's stop there and consider that the facts are there, that there is evidence for our Creator. And if we build upon the solid rock that Jesus spoke of, when the storms of our life come and slam against us, we'll remain. We'll remain steadfast. Let me close with Psalm 8 here this morning. It reads like this. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. From the lips of children and infants you have ordained praise. Because of your enemies to silence the foe and the avenger. And then he says, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? We'll answer that question next week. Let's close in prayer.